We're going to get started. We've got quorum. Yeah, we're going to do this during the agenda. If you can find any other changes. Okay, so I'd like to call this meeting of the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee to order. Welcome committee members and other members of council. And we have 7 items on the agenda today. I'd like to introduce one more very quick one. For those of us in the room, the screens at the back of the room provide real-time updates about where we are in the agenda and what's coming up next. And for those watching online, you can follow the agenda and debate on your computer, tablet, or smartphone at www.toronto.ca/council. So is there any declarations of interest today on any of the items before us? Seeing none, I'm going to go to confirmation of the minutes. Could I have someone motion to confirm the minutes of the last meeting? Councillor McMahon. Do we need a seconder? No. Councillor McMahon, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, we're going to run through the agenda. We have some deputations, although we don't have a lot of deputations. So let's start with, could I have the orange sheet, please? Okay. Yeah, so we've got a speaker. We've got a couple speakers on PW1, which is the permitting street murals on local roads. PW 10.2, undertaking construction of utility infrastructure to support the 6-point interchange reconfiguration. So that's moving approval on that. Councillor Moser, all those in favor? Councillor, did you have a problem?
10.2. 10.2.
Okay, so you're fine with that? So all those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, that carries. PW 10.3, extending the parking pad moratorium to areas outside of the former city of Toronto. Councillor McMahon has Councillor McMahon has a motion on that. That might be.
We're here for that item.
Yeah, we'd like to speak to that.
Okay, so can we just show you what we're going to do? Because what we've decided to do, since we have no report. Okay, we do have a motion to ask for a report.
Let's go through the agenda first.
Okay. PW 10.4, holding utility companies accountable to a higher standard of repair.
No speaker.
There's no speakers on that.
Well, he's withdrawn.
Apparently, he's withdrawn, Councillor. So is there anybody who would like to move that item? Councillor Lee will move PW 10.4. And so we're going to refer this to the general manager. Is everybody okay with that? So all those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, that carries. PW 10.5. That's the, I think there's speakers on that one, is there not?
No, Madam Chair.
Hold, okay, so we've got a hold on that for Councillor Moser. And then we'll just keep going here. PW 10.6, reviewing subject pollutants in the sewer bylaw. And there's speakers on that. PW 10.7, curbside management strategy, records management operations. That's also mine. If we can just move that now if you want to, or if no one wants to hold it, then I'll move that. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Great. Okay, and then there's one to be introduced. Can I have that one? Thank you. So the one to be introduced is coming from me. It's a very quick one. It just requires a motion to add to new business. So it's, do they have it before them or no?
Yes.
They have it.
The pink sheet?
Okay, so it's on the pink sheet? No, nobody has a pink sheet. No? Do they have them or not? Okay, so I'm just going to describe it very quickly. As many of you know, we're undertaking a road safety strategic plan, and this is a request just to zero in on seniors, older Torontonians, older residents, because we're noting that a number of the fatalities are related to that particular demographic. So we think it's wise to do something specific to that demographic in the city. So all those in favor, opposed, that carries. Great, thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to start with, oh, there's another one to introduce. And this is a bit of a problem, my understanding is. So there's an,
Being circulated now.
okay, it's being circulated now. It's from Councillor Mahavik. And it is, it's just kind of come to our attention, I think, yesterday, but my understanding is we need to refer this to staff. So we might want to just do that right off the top.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
if you allow me, that item, it just came to my attention. It happens to be on the boundary of Ward 17 and 21.
of yours,
And my
yes.
community has not been notified. There hasn't been any consultation.
At all.
I have no idea what's being
Yes.
proposed, and I would ask for this item to be either deferred for the next meeting.
Deferred?
Yeah, to have an opportunity for me to speak with city staff and with the councilors as well.
Okay.
Because this totally, in my
Okay.
opinion, even out of order.
So Councillor, can I just ask if you rather it be deferred or we just don't introduce it to
Don't
committee?
introduce, I think, at
Okay,
this point.
Councillor Moser?
This has been approached by community council because they have jurisdiction over lights, so has this been at community council?
No, not that I'm aware of, but I'm not on that community council.
So we just became aware of this today.
Okay,
It's on a
so,
boundary, that's why it's
Send
here.
what?
It's on a boundary, that's why it's here, that's our
okay, so I'm being advised by clerks, it's on a boundary, as Councillor Palacio has pointed out, and that's why it's come here. Having said that, I think we need to refer this to staff or not introduce it, so whatever the committee would like to do.
Madam
We're
Chair,
hearing that
if you
there's
allow me,
no
I think that's a little bit premature at this point to introduce this item. We have to have some meaningful discussions between city staff, the local councillor, and our local communities. This is a traffic light that affects thousands and thousands of residents.
That this would affect, okay. So what would the committee like to do? Just not introduce it today, given it's a boundary issue?
Why don't we receive it and then the two councillors can sit down and work the
It can't be received, it has to be introduced before you can do anything.
Has to be introduced before we can even debate it, is what I'm being told, so.
Well, if we don't introduce it, two councillors can sit down and see what they can work out.
That's right.
And then we can bring it back.
Okay, please do.
So this is surely not the first traffic signal that's come up on a boundary. What is the correct procedure or the established procedure for dealing with a concern like this? Is it a 311 call, a memo from the councillor to the traffic department, or how do we treat these things?
So typically, we would get a letter from a counselor or a community group. It would go to staff. Staff would look at the warrants, look at the conditions, do an assessment, and make a recommendation.
And the recommendation goes to PWIC or council?
Well, in this case, because of the boundary road, it would have to come to this committee.
Okay. So that request for study has not been done. This is the first that we've seen of this.
I'd have to ask the GM whether or not they've seen this before, but I'm not aware of it.
Through the chair, the councilor has approached staff about the issue itself. At this point in time, we don't have any issues, but there has not been community consultation at this point. And because it's on a boundary, we prefer that both councilors discuss the issue before we take action.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll move receipt and then the two councillors can sit down and look at it.
Has to be introduced to move receipt, so unfortunately, procedurally, we can't do that.
You cannot move receipt either. It has to be I would say,
Okay, so what we're being advised by clerks is to introduce it and then defer it pending community consultation. Does that sound all right, or? And a staff report. And a staff report and community consultation pending that. So there it goes. All those in favor, opposed, that carries. All right, so I've had a request to do PW 10.3 parking pad moratorium first. As I indicated as we were going through the running order of the agenda, there is a motion to ask for a staff report on this because there's really not much before us because it's a member's motion that came from council. So we don't have any really data or information before us. So, Councillor McMahon?
So I have a motion which I worked on with the chair and staff. You see it on the screen there. So we'll look at a review of the current City of Toronto policy on parking pads. Oops, we just lost it.
I'll just put it back up, so. There it is. Oh,
Okay, and that's A, and then B is a review of the impact of parking pads on the natural environment. This is with Toronto Water and Stormwater Operations. And C is implementation plan on how to, with regard to how a prohibition on parking pads would be carried out, and estimated timelines. And D, undertake a review to identify a mechanism to bring unauthorized parking pad locations with existing legal ramps into compliance. I ran it by Cam.
sure, go ahead, Councillor Moser.
Are parking pads,
Come back to you, I'll come back.
are parking pads allowed, are they banned right now? What is the city's bylaw right now? Are they banned?
Through the chair, they are currently, in certain areas of the city, they are banned right now, yes.
Certain areas? So can we get a map of what areas are banned now, when this report comes in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, please go ahead, Councillor Holiday.
Can you give me an assessment of how much time and effort it's going to cost to put a report together like this? Considering we've already got a process to deal with parking pads.
Yeah, he's just asking.
Through you, Madam Chair, it would be a considerable amount of time. There's two components to this. One is doing an overall review of the program, which will take a number of months. In addition to that is also doing a review of the number of unauthorized locations, and then also the impact on the sewer systems from the type of paving that's currently permitted versus a recommendation moving forward.
When's the last time we did a review of our parking pad bylaws and processes?
The overall review was originally, the rewriting of the bylaw was done, I believe, in 2006, so 10 years ago.
So we're on a 10-year-old process. In your view, has things changed to the point that it's time for a re-review?
It's always a positive to do a review. I mean, the bylaw itself has been amended over the years through City Council, but an overall review and bylaw assessment hasn't been done in the last 10 years.
And how many parking pads do we approve every year?
That number is very low. I would say approximately 300 of the 700 appeals that we receive would actually get approved.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Councillor Palacio, and then
Before Councillor Palacio, to the chair, you may want to hold this item now, because personally, I don't even support asking for a report. So I'd like to speak on that and give you the reasons why. So if we want to debate it now, we can debate it now, or if you want to hold it down, and we can, because I personally do not support
A lot of people
asking.
wanted more information, right? There's really nothing before us
I
to
know.
even debate, but philosophically, you're saying you're not a fan of
No,
pursuing it.
not on a moratorium citywide. If particular members of council want to have a moratorium on in their particular ward, that's fine.
Yeah.
Just like we did the 30K, right? Everybody, all members of council had their choice. I think you have to hear the councillors in the west end of the city in particular, where there's a need for it, and why, before we even ask for a report, because it's just a waste to ask for a report when there's reasons why front yard parking pads were put in even prior to amalgamation, and the reasons for it.
Okay, so does anybody else have questions of staff? Yeah, go ahead.
I wasn't sure watching from the
Well, we were just
TV
trying,
where you were at, because
we were trying to get more information by asking for a report, but there's some concern about that. So Councillor Palacio is going to speak, and then Councillor Davis, you can go. He's been waiting.
speak?
No,
Ask
you
questions?
can do,
No, just
ask
questions.
questions if you want, if you have any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I do concur with Councilor Nunziata. I would like to speak at length and ask a number of questions to the staff on this one, but at this point, is in terms of general understanding, in terms of how we got to this one, in terms of linear parking. and boulevard parking across the City of Toronto. There has been a tremendous level of support, and my question to staff is that in terms of changes to the municipal code, chapter 918, there has been a number of changes in terms of embracing environmentally friendly materials like EcoStone, semi-permeable materials, and that adds further requirements related to soft landscaping and tree planting. Is that the case?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that is correct. The bylaw is very stringent when it comes to landscaped open space requirements, the type of paving that's permissible within the right-of-way, and also in addition to that is the disconnection of downspouts and the planting of trees.
In terms of the demographics in City of Toronto, we have 4 quadrants, literally speaking. We have Etobicoke, North York, Scarborough, and the downtown. As Kip, you are very much aware of the area that I represent, which is part of the city, in the former city of Toronto and the former city of York, where we have small lots in relation to the other quadrants, where you have huge lots where there is no street parking and there is no need for front yard parking. Is that the case?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that is correct. The demand in the areas that you've identified are far greater than the suburban areas.
So in previous debates at City Council, to reach to this point in terms of some modifications to Chapter 918, all those considerations were given to allow some wards, for example, 17, 13 with Councilor Doucette, and 12 with Councilor Di Giorgio, 11 with Councilor Nunziata, to make those provisions based on community consultation as well. Is that correct?
That is correct. When the bylaw was being redrafted in 2006, there was extensive both public consultation, community consultation, and discussions with members of council, and that was taken into account.
In terms of community consultation, we have a process where the community gets involved, and only if the majority of people in the street, after the poll is done by the city clerk and paid by the applicant, only if there is a majority of people and they are willing to comply with all the requirements, the application will be approved. Is that correct?
That is correct. If it is an appeal where an application has been denied, in order for that appeal to move forward, a favorable poll that is voted on by that neighborhood must show support of the application.
In terms of the real estate, and as we all know, the real estate is very hot, and there is quite a bit of transition. Now, any applications where, and this is the key, where you have concrete or asphalt parking pads, to be able to convert, they have to convert to the environmentally friendly initiatives and requirements that the Chapter 918 requires. Is that correct?
That is correct. It cannot be a hard substance paving. It must be a permeable material acceptable to the city.
And my last question, what's the revenue that we get from front yard parking, especially from seniors, the disabled, that's...
I believe overall, this will be an approximate about $4 to $4.5 million annually.
Thanks so much.
So just to be clear, there are some wards, and I think it was answered on my way running down here, that where parking pads are not allowed, but mostly they're in North York, Scarborough, Etobicoke. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, the majority of wards that currently do not allow front yard parking nor appeals is primarily in the former City of Toronto area.
Front yard parking is front yard parking pads are permitted in Scarborough and Etobicoke?
No, they are not.
No, that's what I'm talking about. So Scarborough, Etobicoke, North York, currently they are prohibited. Is that not the case?
They are prohibited because they've never chosen to be a part of that program, yes.
So they are prohibited. In Toronto and East York, there are some wards, probably the majority, where parking pad applications are not accepted, but an appeal is accepted if they meet certain conditions. Isn't that the case?
That is correct.
So there is not an all-out prohibition in Toronto and East York either, in those wards?
That would be correct.
Okay. And in 2007, we identified that there were different provisions in the former East York and I believe York. They were different from Toronto, former Toronto, in that the appeal process was to Community Council, whereas in East York, the appeal process was through Committee of Adjustment because of different provincial legislation. Is that still correct?
I believe that's still correct, yes.
So have we ever harmonized or requested the provincial government to harmonize the way that we deal with parking pad appeals in Toronto?
Well, our bylaw, to be very clear, only governs the public right-of-way.
Right?
And the modifications that have been done to that bylaw is based on that. We have not lobbied the provincial government for any change.
There was at one point a desire to look at harmonizing between Toronto and East York, for instance, and that didn't happen with respect to the appeal process. I'm asking about the appeal process.
My understanding, and I believe this to a certain degree has been worked on, was the issue of going to a committee of adjustment and seeking a variance, and then how that would then translate to the obligation of the city to license a front yard parking pad that hadn't even been considered.
Would you agree that there are thousands of illegal front yard parking pads where people are not paying any fees and that we are not enforcing them?
To a certain degree, yes, I would.
And that some were put in legally, some not legal, somewhere, so that there is a patchwork of front yard parking arrangements across the city?
That would be fair, yes.
And would you agree that it may be useful to examine all these differences and to look at attempting to try and bring some level of fairness or consistency maybe across the city?
That would be fair, yes.
Okay. And I had one further question. It's just gone from my head. But that's it, I guess, because it's gone.
Okay, just on what Councillor Davis's question about enforcement of all the illegal pads. It was my understanding, because I know what happened in my ward, that in 2007, that we did approve that, that we have our staff go around and charge all the illegal pads. So was that not done? Because I know I've received hundreds of calls where people were told that they were being charged. So I thought we enforced that.
There was a large blitz that did take place in 2007.
Yeah.
As it stands now, we do not proactively go out and look for illegal pads. We deal with them on either a complaint basis.
On a complaint.
Or as staff observe them during illegal construction.
Because I report a lot of them myself. If I see they're illegal, I report them. So maybe we should be looking at that, because I do agree. I mean, if you have an illegal pad, you should be charged and you should go through the process and pay, because all licenses, there's a revenue paid to the city, and they pay that revenue, and it's not fair that some people do and some people don't. So I agree on that enforcement. That should have been done. So what was, I missed the question from Councillor Palacio, as far as the total revenue that you receive in for the ones that are legal. What is the total amount now?
That would be approximately between $4 and $4.5 million annually in revenues for the off-street parking section.
And so if we were to do a blitz, because I would say half of the people don't have, that are illegal, so approximately, do you have any idea approximately how many that would be? I'm talking about the old city, like City of York, we allowed front yard parking. But with the City of York, you had to apply, you had to go to the Committee of Adjustment. It wasn't the way it is now. That's the way it was in York. So what would you estimate the amount that's out there?
Well, through you, Madam Chair, I can give my opinion only on that matter, but I can tell you through all the years of experience that we have a good assessment that the number of illegal parking pads would not comply with the current regulations as far as paving, landscaped open space, meeting the general criteria of the bylaw. That's why they have not been licensed. If we were to waive the criteria of the bylaw, which is how I see these properties being licensed, then there is a potential to bring in an additional $2 to $3 million.
Okay, now, when we do reconstruction on our streets, and the city staff are out there, and you have to, if there's a front yard parking, you give them the ramp and that. So at that time, can we not have our staff look at that, and if there are any illegal ones, you don't put their ramp in? Yeah, rather than replace the illegal ones.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that is what staff are supposed to be doing when they
Yeah.
are marking out the ramping. That is the intent. They're supposed to be verifying that those pads are legal. There have been a number of changes over the years where some locations had amendments and there were certain lapses in bylaws when ramping was installed. So, but again, to your point, yes, they should.
And so, and if they advise the resident, then give them an opportunity to apply for it, and then at the same time you do the ramp, rather than have to duplicate it, as long as they legalize it. Okay, thanks.
So I'm glad you asked that, because that was going to be one of them. We replaced the illegal curb cuts. Anyway, we did a pilot project in former Toronto in wards 18 and 21, which was you bring your legal pad into compliance and meet these requirements, and we will license them or enforce. Did that happen, and what were the results?
I am aware of the lax provision, if you will, that would allow residents to come and apply in meeting with the bylaw criteria. And my understanding, and I don't have the number in front of me, it was only a handful of locations
Right,
that were actually licensed.
So we tried to get them to comply, but did we enforce afterwards?
That I would have to verify.
Do you think it's reasonable that we put some money and time and resources and effort into rationalizing this mess that we have out there?
Through you, Madam Chair, if it is the wish of committee or council for us to enforce and take a proactive position on front yard parking, then that would be your discretion.
Thank you.
Sorry, thanks. I'm pushing the wrong button here. Lou, our general manager of water. So my concern is from these parking pads is the stormwater and basement flooding of neighbors and impacts from water, I guess, when we're paving over all these front yards. So can you share with us some of the impacts that you're aware of?
Madam Chair, yes, we've found that there have been issues throughout the city, and it's in selected neighborhoods, tied to the topography, the way the homes drain towards the roadway, or if they're built on grades. As you harden the surface, you do get like flash flooding when it rains heavily. We've seen it in certain parts, and I know some of the councillors in this room have seen it within their own wards where they have steep grades.
Yeah.
And when you have hard pavement surfaces, you do get more runoff happening faster, which can then either impact your neighbors, running directly onto your neighbor's property, or if it's directed to the roadway, will put more water more quickly into the sewer, causing it to surcharge. So there are impacts by having more hard surfaces in a neighborhood.
And so what happens when the neighbor's house floods? Does the city hear about it? Do we end up with a
Yes, Madam Chair.
claim?
We get many complaints throughout the year, and in most cases, that becomes then a property standards issue, as our bylaws do say that your drainage has to be managed in a manner that's not impacting your neighbor. So we, the city, get dragged into many disputes on private drainage issues and the way water flows amongst properties.
So in the end, some of this, hardening these surfaces across the city could impact our budget in that we would maybe be paying claims for some of this.
Typically, if it is a strictly private matter, the city will be advising them that it's an unfortunate situation and the neighbors have to figure a way to resolve it themselves. If there are situations, and there are situations in the city where the city does have infrastructure that they own in backyards or nearby, it then could impact the city where we might have to make investments to fix some of these problems that happen after the fact. They were never part of the original design of the subdivision or the community. And then over time, these incremental changes add up to a lot more flow going into the sewer, which we hadn't planned for. And now we're reacting after the fact.
Okay. My next question is for Kip. So Kip, my understanding is that, even though Councillor Davis, my understanding is from, and I don't know if this is accurate, so I'm really asking, that even though they say the surfaces are permeable, they're actually not. What kind of information or research have you got on that? Because I'm hearing that constantly, these surfaces are not permeable.
Well, through you, Madam Chair, I mean, there's variations of permeability. The original permissible permeable paving, which was more of an interlocking brick, has been confirmed that it's not. Now we're looking at a minimum 25%. So staff are being more vigilant on the type of material and confirming the type of the material that's being used.
Okay. And are you aware, so I'm just confused about something you said earlier to Councillor Davis. Actually, in North York, we do have a number of wards that still, so just to clarify, will you for the citywide, what's happening citywide? I know it's various wards.
So front yard parking for the most part only existed in the former East York, City of Toronto, and York.
Okay.
And those areas, those portions that fall within the new boundaries of the districts and the community councils, the parking is still there and still available. So in the former North York area is primarily where there is no front yard parking.
Okay. And have you had a chance, I'll just give you an example from North York Community Council. One applicant will come forward and ask for something. The next one will come forward and ask for almost the same thing. One gets turned down, one gets accepted. It's just kind of almost the flavor of the day. Have you researched at all the outcomes of these deliberations at the various community councils? Because it just seems to me like the process is somehow flawed.
Through you, Madam Chair, we haven't done an in-depth review of the number overall appeals by community council. We can say that in a general perspective, about half of the appeals citywide are approved and half are denied.
And any particular rhyme or reason to those?
Not to my knowledge.
I find it very bizarre how things unfold at North York anyway. Why?
Because Councillor Doucette has a lot out our community council, is that if you have a parking space, you have a garage, then we won't allow it. We only approve the ones that have no parking at all and they don't have a garage. That's when they're approved.
Okay.
So that's why half of them are not approved, because they have a garage and they want to have an additional parking space. So it's only for people that have no parking.
Thanks. It's my last question is, how does it increase the property value? For instance, in North Toronto, let's say the Wanless Bedford area, how much does it increase property value? I almost hate to ask it.
So from what we've realized in speaking with the market as a whole is that it'll average anywhere between $50,000 to $100,000 per space.
50, okay, wow. All right, I shouldn't have asked that. Yes, Councillor Moser, do you have a question or speak? You want to speak?
And I have one more question.
Okay, go ahead.
If we were to find out that the parking pad is affecting the neighbor negatively, and the only way we can fix it is to remove it, is there a condition in our agreement that if it's impacting one neighbor or the other, that we can withdraw the permission to remove the parking pad?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes. The ultimate delegated authority lies with the General Manager of Transportation, who has the right to alter if it's causing an adverse impact on the adjacent property.
So that's part of the condition.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, I think we're done with our questions. So would anybody like to speak, any visiting councillors? Councillor Davis would like to speak. So go ahead, Councillor Davis. Councillor Palacio, I don't know if, go ahead.
I'm fully supportive of the motion that Councillor McMahon has just moved. I think the one before us, which was just an outright ban, is not sufficient, doesn't provide any background information to really understand implications and how we might go about doing this in a way that is fair and consistent. So we do need another report. What is happening right now in the former Toronto and East York district, and I presume in York that used to have front yard parking, and in portions of North York that were former Toronto, is that we have a total patchwork of provisions. In other areas of the city, it's completely prohibited. Whereas in our areas that had it in the previous municipalities, it's allowed. However, it's allowed ward by ward differently in the Toronto and East York district. We have no enforcement, virtually no proactive enforcement. So only if there are complaints will we actually take any action against those that are built illegally. When we rebuild sidewalks and resurface roads, we are reinstalling illegal curb cuts that go to illegal front yard parking pads. There are questions all the time about what is the city doing? Why is this fair that that person is paying and that person is not? And they're both parking on their front lawns. We determined as well under the last zoning bylaw that there would be landscaping provisions about the front and the rear yards. And if we have the opportunity with a report that's coming forward as well, which is we asked for a report to look at green development standards for residential properties that have less than 6 units. So I believe that if we're going to be looking at how to remedy all of the illegal parking pads and a policy that is consistent across the city, we also need to be looking at what are our environmental objectives. Because absolutely every time we pave over a front yard parking pad, even using interlocking brick, we are creating a greater stormwater problem in the City of Toronto. And I have watched as front yard after front yard gets paved or bricked and contributes more and more to stormwater problems in the City of Toronto. So I think this needs to be a comprehensive review. If it takes staff, additional staff, we should dedicate some additional staff to doing this. We should be looking at it from all perspectives. The other thing that's happening in the City of Toronto is that if you build a parking pad in your front lawn, but it's 100% on private property, in other words, it's just north of the right-of-way, we give an automatic curb cut. Now, why do we give an automatic curb cut if someone puts a front yard parking pad entirely on private property? What I discovered was that our buildings review people were reviewing these quite inconsistently as well. What is the front wall of the house? If you've got an L-shaped house, what is the front wall of the house? So many people have been designing their homes in a way that could put a parking pad in front of the front wall of the house, which is supposedly prohibited. There are so many inconsistencies that are happening with front yard parking. We've got to get hold of this somehow and deal with it. And I'm pleased. I think it's a huge job, and there are going to have to be resources attached to it. Several years ago, I asked in East York for the transportation staff to identify all the illegal front yard parking pads and to look at an approach that we could take to legalize them and to make sure there were a set of conditions that were attached if they were going to be legalized. One of them, I think, should be there should be a net reduction in non-permeable surfaces on your property. If you take out your backyard garage and parking pad in the back of your house and put it in the front, but there's a net reduction in hard surfaces, maybe that's something we should do. People come to me all the time and say, I've taken out the backyard parking pad and I've made it greener overall. So what's the deal? You don't like parking pads on the front. Well, there's this whole question of the aesthetics of having parking on the front yard of your house. So I think all of these questions have to be examined, and I do hope that council will adopt it and that the people from Scarborough and North York will please let us have this review so that there is some fairness across the city in how we approach front yard parking. Just one last thing. There's a different way. Toronto has a specific piece of legislation that was provided by the provincial government some years ago so that the appeals come to community council. In other parts of the city, they go to committee of adjustment. It's just very inconsistent. It's difficult for us to understand, let alone the public. And we've got to make it clear and make it fair and implement something consistently across the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to move a motion, and I'm not sure if the clerk is ready with the motion, but I can refer to it. That there are a couple of changes there. That the Municipal Code Chapter 918 on parking regulation on residential front yard parking and boulevard parking be left as is, and to ensure that the existing environmentally semi-permeable materials like soft landscaping and tree planting requirements be fully enforced. I did make a couple changes to the motion, and I'm hoping that it will be displayed there. In the meantime, and I'll speak to the item, Madam Chair, is as I questioned city staff several years ago, the changes were, a number of changes have been made to the Municipal Code Chapter 918. There has been, that I recall, at least 5 or 6 changes to it. And that's change to the parking, residential front yard parking, and boulevard parking, and street parking, and so on. And one of the great things that we did is in terms of embracing more environmentally friendly, semi-permeable materials and adding requirements related to soft landscaping and tree planting. Now, as we all know, there has been a tremendous activity within the real estate market. And that's the time, and every time that there is an application, what happens is that the application cannot be transferred automatically. There has to be an application in terms for the application to be approved. And at that point, all those parking pads that have concrete, asphalt, they have to comply with the new requirements in terms of either installing eco-stones, friendly environmentally, and materials and so on. And also, every time that we have road reconstruction everywhere, city staff, they have been doing a phenomenal work in terms of having proactive enforcement. Every time that there is a road reconstruction, they are going and they are checking all the illegal front yard parkings that we have within the community. And those people are served with a notice of violation. Either they have to apply to legalize the existing, or they have to remove and restore what's there to either grass or soft landscaping. So a number of things have been done to mitigate the stormwater runoff and all the risks to basement flooding, as the general manager, Toronto Water, has indicated. So that was the purpose of the whole thing in terms of the disconnection of the downspouts and whatever else. And that's one way that city staff have an opportunity to ensure that all of that's done. So we are capturing all those, the illegal ones, and trying to beautify and make radical changes to what was there. So the bylaw in itself, under the municipal code, chapter 19, is very proactive. Ward 17 is very much a downtown ward, and with narrow streets and a lack of off-street parking facilities. And that's factual information, that's what it is. In many cases, we have people with senior citizens, people with physical disabilities that they apply for it. And they have very valid medical reasons for those applications to be approved. So in terms of accessibility, that's one of the issues that we have to be mindful as well. And so approval of front yard parking in terms of community consultation is paramount. What's happening here is we are trying to introduce, or the notice of motion that came from City Council is to introduce something without community consultation. We have a bylaw at the moment under the Municipal Code, Chapter 918, that's extremely well written, where the community has an opportunity to provide community input. And only when people are in full agreement to it, these applications could be approved. So I think that, thank you, Madam Chair. So our area in relation to the other quadrants of the city is not the same. We have small lots that it's a necessity to have this. We don't have the luxury like in New York or Scarborough, where you have huge lots where there is no need, not even of having street parking. Madam Speaker, my motion is, hopefully that can be displayed on the, and I will appreciate if, thank you. So that's the,
Yeah, I'll speak. First of all, I find it very disturbing that this motion came through council by Councillor Carroll asking for a moratorium on front yard parking without knowing what the impacts it will have on other parts of the city. And as was mentioned, where front yard parking is legal in the former city of York, Toronto, and East York, without knowing that, to ask for a full right moratorium without having all the details. You know, Councillor McMahon is moved a motion to defer to ask for a report, which I don't particularly agree with. But, you know, I think members of council have to understand the reason why we have front yard parking and the reason why it was implemented years ago, in particular in the city of York. And as Councillor Palacio mentioned, Councillor Doucette has a number of parking pad applications that come forward at Community Council, is the reason that in the older part of the city, if I can have some order, please, I can't even think. In the older parts of the city, and in particular in City of York, we have small homes, small lots. They're built with, none of them have driveways. They have nowhere to park. And the reason why we implemented the front yard parking, which was way back in 1985 in the former City of York, is to allow residents an opportunity to have a parking space, because there were not available parking spaces on the street. And so that's the reason why it was implemented. Over the years, what's happened is that there's been a lot of them that have been illegal ones that haven't been enforced, and I do agree that they should be enforced, and because there are people that are paying for it and people that are not paying for it. And I think that if you have a pad, that you should pay for it. Now, a lot of the ones that are coming forward, in particular in my ward, is they're not new front yard parking pads. They're pads that have been there for 30 years, and that when the house was built, that's the way the house was built. And so the enforcement officer is coming and charging them because they have an illegal pad, but the pad has been there for a number of years, so they're coming forward to legalize what they have, the existing what they have. Most of them are my ward, that's what's happening. Not that they're asking for new front yard parking and that they want to excavate their front yard. The pad is there. A lot of these homes are sold with an existing parking pad, so they're coming to the city to legalize it, which is good because it's there, and it's better to have them legalized than illegal. Now, some of these subdivisions that were built, especially in the former city of North York, I have a subdivision that was built in the former city of North York that's now my ward, where they have townhouses that were built, and all of them were built with front yard parking pads, like small little driveways, and all the cars that are parked, some of it's parked on the back end of your vehicle is on city property. So the city is coming along saying, no, this is front yard parking, and going around charging all them. These are subdivisions that the city has approved. And then we're coming back years later, once the people have moved in, and said, hey, you know, this is illegal. And this is a front yard parking pad. The argument that I get from residents is why they have to pay. That was the biggest argument, why they have to pay when if you have a private driveway and you have 3 or 4 cars parked in your driveway and the last car parked in your driveway is on city property, you don't have to pay for that. But if you have a pad, you have to pay for it. That's where the argument I've always had over the years is the unfairness. But you explain to them they have to pay for it, they're fine with that. So as far as a moratorium, I disagree with the moratorium because, you know, there are parts of the city, as I indicated, that there's a huge need for it. As long as they meet the conditions and the requirements that the city is asking, I'm fine with that. But if they don't, and if they want a second parking space, I will not support it. So I'm just asking members of council to take that in consideration when you do vote on it. It's not, you have to think of the whole city, and it's just like when Toronto and East York went through the 30K, and they wanted it just Toronto and East York, and we supported it because you wanted it in your district. I want front yard parking in my district, and I should be allowed to do that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Extremely complicated because we have so many different situations. There's been practices all over the city that aren't consistent. But how our city looks is so important to us, and how it functions is important. You know, we heard from staff that there are situations where front yard pads have impact on their neighbors, water-wise. From the response when I asked the question, can we legally take them out? Apparently, we do have the right, if there's a complaint, staff can say, I'm sorry, but under the circumstances, we're going to have to remove it. The reason how we enforce the bylaw in Scarborough, it's a zoning bylaw. We don't allow any cars in the front portion of a house. And that's the bylaw we enforce. Because we feel that how the houses look in our neighborhoods is very important. Now, we do get a lot of people who push the envelope with that, and we report them as soon as possible. Sometimes the neighbors report them because they're, you know, it doesn't look great for the neighborhood. So part of our job is to look at these from a practical point of view. On my own street, one of my neighbors put one in front portion of the house. And I asked him that he take it out. It's not easy to do, especially when it's on your street. But I feel strongly about this. I'm going to support Councillor McMahon's motion. I think it's reasonable. And I think we have to start looking at consistency and how we approach this. There's been past practices where councillors have taken a certain approach. And part of our job is to look at it from a practical point of view. How these parking pads impact the city collectively is part of that. On the face of it, one parking pad doesn't look like much. But if you have 4 or 5 of them on the street, collectively, all of a sudden, you may have a different situation stormwater-wise. And I don't envy the councillors who have this situation in their wards. Because On Tuesday, Councillor Cho again moved a motion that we allow on-street parking in Scarborough. Overwhelmingly, it was turned down, thank the Lord. And, you know, but that's a situation he has in his own ward. We have more and more where the youngsters are staying at home now, and it puts extra pressure on all of our wards as far as the parking issue. So when a neighbor complains now about their neighbor parking consistently on the street, we get the call to say, why am I getting so many tickets? But I believe in the process because of snow removal and so forth. So I think we need to look at how consistent we are, how it impacts our city, both from a point of view of how it looks, and also collectively from a point of view of stormwater management. I supported this at council because I thought we needed some consistency throughout the city. But I think we need the details now, given the deputations by the councillors. I think we need to look at it from an overall point of view, from the city perspective, and what it means collectively when we allow these pads. So I'm going to support the motion, and I'm not going to support any other motions as part of this.
Thank you, Councillor Moser. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Chair. My motion is quite simple, that consideration of this item be deferred indefinitely. We are creating a problem where one doesn't exist. And I see this time and time at community council. People come in and they talk about they bought a home, and they've learned after they bought the home that the parking pad was illegal. I did some quick math. There's 300 parking pads approved in the city. So, you know, at 2.5 meters by 5 or 6 meters, that's 3,000 and change square meters. Well, that's a couple times the size of this room. In Ward 3, I've got about 30,000 detached homes. Those all have driveways that have 4, 6, 8 cars that can park on it of hard surface. Multiply that math out, you're over 1 million, maybe 1.5 million square meters of hard surface, compared to 3,000. That's my ward alone. So to bring this forward on the auspices that this is some sort of a stormwater crisis, this is a drop in the bucket, 300 parking pads. So I don't buy it. 3,000 square meters is a building in this city that's approved of hard surface. And that doesn't include how many of those that are already in place and we're just normalizing them. The most alarming element about the motion that's put forward is item D, which infers that we're going to create a cottage industry of enforcement. We're going to send the parking pad police out there to go and find illegal parking pads and bring them through a mechanism to change them. We've got limited resources in the transportation services area. I would rather have them spend their time on road safety issues than trying to hunt down parking pads. If you want to find a quick way to get citizens angry with their government, is go out and look for infractions. That's not to say I think people should get off easy. The thing that's bothered me in a lot of the parking pad approvals is that people go and buy the house and they tell us that it was represented that the parking pad was illegal to them. And I get that it's a gray area, but I think the new residents need to hold the sellers and the sellers' agents and all of the hands involved in the changeover of the home, the lawyer, the house inspector, the real estate agent, accountable for the way that maybe that parking pad was represented. That's not the job of the council, but that's the thing that I've noticed in the pattern right here. So I hope we just put this motion aside and not create a problem where one doesn't exist. And I hope you consider it. Thank you.
Yes, there was no deputants present, so you can speak.
Yes, I know you're indulging me and letting me do that, and I really appreciate that. Thanks so much, Councillor. The reason for moving this motion has a lot to do with why I was delayed today. I was at a major presentation to the business community on Consumers Next, a planning initiative that requires a great look at transportation, a lot of evaluation of transportation. All of us have needs that aren't being met because staff are spending time on this. We're enforcing illegal parking pads in one item in suburban community councils and saying you have to remove a parking pad that's been there for 20 years. And in the very next item, a couple of councillors, Madam Chair being one, are having to look at appeals for brand new ones. We look like we don't know what our policy is. We look like we're not serious about our policy, and we're spending so much of our staff's time on something we've already given them direction on. And at the bottom of it all in North York is that we're being weak on a policy that in actual fact was only put there to assist our residents with their problems with flooding. If we're not serious about the politics around parking pads, surely we're serious about flooding. And so I think it behooves us to get the report from staff on what amount of time they are spending on this now, the impact it is having on us, and what would be the impact of getting serious about our policy that we really cannot allow any more parking pads and any more excessive paving. They're ready to write the report. I won't name names, but some of them were walking on air when this motion was moved by myself and seconded by Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong. Thank you.
Structure because Councillor Denzil Minnan-Wong was the former chair of this committee, and he's votes consistently against parking pads at North York Community Council, as does on a regular basis Councillor Carroll, although she does thoughtfully consider each case. I guess the thing is, I feel this is being handled just like a dog's breakfast. It's all over the place. Councillor Carroll just cited a good example. The residents are extremely confused at these council meetings, community council meetings, because one gets approved and the next doesn't. It seems we're being fickle, but I just think we need to really zero in on this. And Councillor McMahon's motion, and I did work with her on it, gives us an opportunity to really study this in depth. Again, it takes away green space, the poor aesthetics. As the chair of Public Works, I worry, night and day about rainwater absorption and stormwater management and basement flooding, which we end up with claims on when the neighbors get flooded because more hard surfaces are being put in place. So I also worry about the trees and the old and new ones and the drip lines and, of course, the heat island effect. All these things are a concern for our city. On a very kind of basic level, the curb cuts that get, that happen when you put in a new parking pad, and my understanding is it can take up to 2 spaces. I'll get a nod. Sometimes the curb cuts can be 2 parking spaces on the street, and we all know parking on our local streets is at a premium. So I'm not sure a full-out moratorium is in order, but I do think taking the time to review this and study this is very important. So I hope people will support Councillor McMahon's motion that's before us, and I really love her item D, where we'll get an opportunity to look at illegal pads, which are rampant across the city. So given that, I will say all those in favor. Oh no, I guess we start with Councillor Holliday's motion. So Councillor Holliday's motion is a consideration of this item be deferred indefinitely. All those in favor? One opposed? No, Councillor. You can't vote, but that was cute. Nice, cute attempt. All those in favor? Against? That loses, and so then we move to Councillor McMahon's item, which is it's an amendment of Holliday's. motion, so if you could put it on the screen. Okay, so I'm getting a request from staff to move this, the deadline for this into the fall. Would the committee be comfortable with that if we gave them a bit more time? So October, yeah, October 18? Did you want to say something?
No, if you're getting a report, I think that's great. I think you should get it sooner because all the councilors are going to be pressured to get, all the residents are going to ask for their parking pads now.
I know. Well, that's what Councillor Davis said we should put a moratorium in place now until we get the report, but anyway. All right, so here we are. Yes, we wish he was here. All those in favor of the motion before us? Opposed? That carries. Thank you very much, everybody. I know. Kristen Carmichael Greb. All right. All right, we're going to move on to PW 10.1. We've got 3 speakers because 1 speaker has withdrawn. And my apologies to the speakers that we delayed this, but there was good reason for it because we had to deal with that other issue. So PW 10.1, options for permitting street or intersection murals on local streets. And our first speaker today is Jerry Brown. Jerry, welcome. And you have 5 minutes. That's okay. We'll just hold your time till you're ready. Here he is.
While we fiddle around with the, we like to have the pretty pictures, but this item is clearly about more than pretty pictures. Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members, and city staff. My name is Jerry Brown. I'm a resident of Ward 30, and I'm here today to speak in favor of instituting a pilot project to install street murals in Toronto. As noted in the staff report from Traffic Services before the committee, street murals are citizen-led projects found in some cities in North America where local roads are painted with community art. Started in Portland, Oregon more than 20 years ago, these projects have been created in Minneapolis, Vancouver, Halifax, Kitchener, and Ottawa, among others. I strongly support street murals based on my belief in the need for our local communities and neighborhoods to retain at least some control over the streets and traffic that are a key part of their infrastructure. While I'd agree that street murals may be largely symbolic, that symbolism can be a powerful and empowering force for leading real change in our city. I'm sure the committee members are aware of the statistics on pedestrian and cyclist collisions in our region, and specifically the 64 deaths that occurred in 2015. But I would also like to point to the number of collisions as noted in the recent public health report on pedestrian and cycling safety in Toronto. Over the 5-year period from 2008 to 2012, there were over 10,000 pedestrians and 5,000 cyclists who were injured or died as a result of a collision with a motor vehicle in Toronto. These stark numbers indicate that we have a problem in our city, It's appalling that we have over 8 pedestrian or cyclist injuries every day. I know this committee is looking at giving local residents a traffic calming manual for use by neighborhood groups so that they can implement appropriate safety measures on their local streets. So how do street murals fit into this picture? They fit by giving local neighborhood groups another tool to send a message to the broader community. We're concerned about safety. We care about our neighbors. We want a safe place to raise our children. And most importantly, we want drivers to pay attention when they're driving on our streets. I'd like to note 2 things included in the staff report. First, these are citizen-led projects. That is, the city should only be involved to the extent necessary to ensure safety and the implementation of any city standards. And these projects have been created in a number of other North American cities. That list of 5 North American cities where street murals have been tried is proof that they have worked in other places. I spoke with an official connected with, with one of these projects. Their outcomes were all positive, both in terms of community engagement, results, and cost effectiveness. They were able to complete 4 projects involving both community groups and local students in a range of socioeconomic neighborhoods. All 4 projects brought a diverse group of people together and required a minimal amount of bureaucratic oversight. And the city has now moved ahead by incorporating street murals into existing city programs. An examination of how other cities include street murals indicates a range of options, either through transportation services, art programs, or community development. The key point is that all these cities found a cost-effective, successful way to allow communities to do street murals. In reviewing the list of objections in the staff report, I'm struck by how vague they are. I submit it's important to remember, again, we're talking about citizen-led projects that a community comes to the city wanting to carry out in order to make a statement about ownership and safety on its roads. So, item number 5 is a given. In fact, the basis of any street mural proposal comes from asking the community if this issue is important to them. It's a process that is designed to bring the community together, to paint the mural as a marker to the rest of the world. And in fact, I believe subsequent speakers may speak more directly to this. My understanding of the process in every other city is that each community that has done this has considered community building a key factor in the painting of the mural. So let's move on to road safety. Traffic Services report raises safety-related concern 5 times. Since the basic idea is that street murals would convey a safety message to drivers, clearly the mural must be noticeable to the driver. Again, if there's evidence in other jurisdictions about safety concerns, they should be spelled out directly in the report. Instead, we have these blanket assertions with no specific evidence to support them. And in fact, they go against the anecdotal evidence about the effect of street murals in every other city. In closing, I would ask the committee members to consider what street murals represent in symbolic terms for a community and a neighborhood, and to place them in the context of a toolkit for our neighborhoods to increase safety and security. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right. Do you have any questions? Mr. Brown?
I'm curious to know if there is evidence that shows that there are not safety issues.
Well, to my,
You're aware of.
I'm not an expert. Again, I have spoken with the person I spoke with was in Ottawa. I've read a number of of articles regarding these issues in all these other cities, and again, I've run across no evidence that they create a safety problem. There are issues in terms of the type of paint and how that's done, but they're generally on low traffic, low impact areas, so they're not on busy streets because of the wear of the paint. And the anecdotal evidence is that they increase safety. Certainly don't decrease it.
So one of the issues that I'm certainly thinking about in this policy discussion is accessibility and the potential for people with sight impairment, as well, misinterpreting or not understanding markings on roads, which are really important cues for navigating streets and intersections. And I'm wondering if you've looked at the question of accessibility.
Well, I think that, I mean, where that has come up, there are some cities where they have done this on crosswalks specifically, and I think the issue comes up there because you are dealing with road markings that you know, people are accustomed to. This is where I cross, this is, and I think putting them there, you know, I would not recommend. I mean, as you can see from the picture, I mean, these are so clearly different than standard road. You know, they're vibrant. They cover an entire intersection. You know, again, I haven't read of any evidence where there has been an issue in terms of people with visual impairments having problems, because they are so, the whole point of the street mural is that it is so different from what you usually see, that's in their very nature. So you want people to stop and look and go like, oh, this is different. What is the message here? You know, what is this doing on a...
Why would we want that, to stop and look, and what is the message here?
Because I know in my own, I mean, I was involved in a traffic committee in my own neighborhood in Riverdale, which wound up going quite badly, in fact, for a very number of reasons. But the issue is that drivers simply don't, we all know drivers are in a rush. They want to get somewhere, traffic is bad, they're in a hurry. And it's one thing if you're driving on the Don Valley or the 401. It's one thing if you're driving on a 6-lane road like Eglinton or something. It's quite another if you're in a neighborhood, you know, with, as the city has done, with a 30-kilometer speed limit, with school children, with seniors, with where you want people walking, you want a vibrant neighborhood, you want people on the streets, and most drivers simply don't pay attention to that. You're in a different zone. You're not somewhere where you can race through the streets. You need to drive slowly and carefully and pay attention. And I think, you know, you know, the other thing that most other cities have found is that it is a way to get things started in the neighborhood, and it is a very positive. You know, as I say, the outcomes in our neighborhood were quite negative in terms of how the community became divided. This is a way to bring everyone together and to have a positive outcome, and that can lead to other things.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your deputation. In your research on this or experience, have you found examples of murals being installed on private roadways and private parking lots?
No, all the things that I have read are in terms of cities approving these and doing either pilot projects or having them as part of a general process. So they are on public roads, not private. I mean, there may be examples, but I haven't run across them.
I haven't seen any either. Because you've looked into this in depth, and it's sort of a curious element to me. If a private proprietor, right, has a large parking lot, doesn't need approval to have one of these installed. In fact, it could enhance maybe their parking lot. Why aren't we seeing more of them out there? Where's the spirit about creating these, and why haven't others jumped at it, given there's no administration to go through?
I mean, I think if you look at the rationale in all the cities, and I know the one that was done in Toronto and Regal Heights, they come from and they are an expression of the interest of the community in taking over their streets, really. And I think that's a private landowner, a mall owner, someone with a parking lot. There isn't the incentive to do this. I mean, if you're going to do something like that, you're probably going to do a wall mural. I mean, that, you know, I was just at at an event down in Leslieville about refreshing the mural. And again, that's another way to express, you know, if you just want art, then street murals are not the best way to do it. I think the unique thing about the street mural is, yes, there is an art element, but the more important element is the ownership of the street and you know, this is our neighborhood. You know, we would like you to take care when you're here, and I think that's. So that tends to be what it comes out of and hopefully what the result is.
So the other thing that comes to mind is that given it's a roadway, it's public space, there's people that front onto it, there's a fair amount of care that needs to go into the evolution of a project like this. And the city, I think, has a duty to be involved to make sure that the space is looked after and curated. And I suspect there's real costs to do that, right? There's people's time, there's the development of a policy, there's a review process, there could be some maintenance, and you know, maybe even one day the city could be on the hook to remove the mural if it doesn't live on or doesn't get cared for in some circumstances. Would you be supportive of a process that would require the interested groups in raising enough money to cover all this so that taxpayers aren't on the hook?
Oh, certainly. And in fact, in most of the cities, you know, one of the requirements is that they have insurance, so that, you know, in order to take on the project, there is some sort of group that does enter into a contract with the city, both in terms of the, you know, process to put the mural on and in terms of agreeing to maintain it after. And again, I mean, so theoretically, if it isn't maintained, it just fades away. And I mean, I know one of the issues in Ottawa was that they did find that if you don't use road paint, it has a very short lifespan. Sure. So that is one of the simple things is you have standards in terms of what kind of paint has to be used. And again, now the only thing I would say in terms of the experience in other cities is if there isn't any money, you know, if a community can't apply in terms of a street art program or something, you tend to not, you know, you tend to have it in certain economic areas where people can afford it. So I would hope that the city would consider giving grants in appropriate places so that any community...
Fundraising is always, I mean, even if it's a couple $1,000, it could be expensive. I mean, it could be some sticker shock on it, but at the end of the day, there's rationale behind the cost, right? We have to make sure that taxpayers aren't on the hook, that it's truly a community effort and the community can cover the cost.
Yes, certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Brown, do you live in the Regal Heights community?
I do not. I kind of wish I did. No, I live in Riverdale.
Thank you. There has been, within the report, one of the concerns from city staff is community safety and cost. Now, are you aware that the Springmount mural was done by the local community?
Yes.
And mainly by children, youth, seniors, an entire community.
Well, yeah, no, and that is, you know, again, that is one of the very positive outcomes of this is just the process of bringing everyone together, of, you know, both the planning and the actual event, and then people do kind of, you know, take an ownership of the street and of the community. That's, you know, that's the outcome that can be achieved through these.
So in terms of community safety, are you aware that, for example, when this mural was created, it was during the summer months when we had a street festival when the street was closed down, and so there was a social gathering with the community. So in terms of safety, that everything was done and in a way that there was no danger to anyone.
Oh, yeah, no, and again, I mean, in our neighborhood, we often have street closings for, you know, a block will apply for a street closure to have a party. I mean, the city has a process for doing that, And again, I mean, I certainly expect the city would have requirements and standards, and there would be a process that people would have to go through. And certainly, you know, getting a permit for the street closure is obviously a requirement.
Generally speaking, I think that's one of the recommendations that I'll be putting forward is literally that this kind of initiative is not going to be at main intersections but it's going to be mainly perhaps within a mid-block and side streets where there is little traffic, where the safety aspect won't be an issue at all.
Well, no, and I think pretty much every city has a requirement of, you know, on a local road, less than 2,500 cars per day. You know, they're not, if you're having cars going through at 70, 80 kilometers an hour, you know, it doesn't really work. You need it in a low-speed, low-traffic area. And again, as I say, it's not that this is going to be the way to control traffic in the area, but as a symbol and as a way to engage the community, I think they are worthwhile.
In relation to the graffiti management plan, that has been a tremendous success in City of Toronto, and it has won international recognition and also international awards. And do you think that this kind of street murals or art reflects part of the graffiti management plan?
And again, oddly enough, in terms of looking at what the experience is in other cities, there doesn't seem to be a problem with graffiti. I don't know what the rationale for that is or the reason, but it seems as though there isn't a problem now. I mean, if there is in Toronto, again, we do have a process and a way to control that. So again, it fits into an existing city program where it can be managed.
My last question. In terms of willing partners, when you have a community that's united, cohesive, in terms of promoting, cultivating, and working together to promote the art, do you think this is the right approach just to move forward?
Yes.
Thank you.
Do you think the city should be involved in developing standards?
In terms of 4th Street murals, yes. But again, as I say, there is a wealth of of evidence that the city can use in terms of how other cities are managing this and what works and what doesn't. And I certainly think, I mean, to the extent that that has to be done, then there is a cost and a time factor for the city bureaucracy. I think it's worth it.
There's two issues which are outlined in the report. One is the safety issues that, people, the paint itself. It's got to be anti-slip and so forth. And the second one is maintenance. I don't know how long these murals would last under winter conditions. So who do you think should be responsible for those particular issues?
Well, again, as I say, what the experience is in the other cities that I've looked in depth at is that there is a contract signed. The community, so the first thing is, as I say, the paint, there have to be specific requirements for certain kinds of paint, which are actually fairly expensive. But if you don't use the paint, literally the mural will be gone in weeks or months. So that's the first thing. Part of the idea is that you do want a lasting thing there. So the paint standards are important, and then generally the community groups sign a contract and they take on that they will refresh it every whenever it's needed. Now, again, worst case scenario, if it isn't refreshed, I don't see any obligation on the city to maintain it. It simply wears away and eventually it's gone. If somehow the community doesn't, it would be kind of sad because the whole idea is that the community is engaged and this is a symbol of their engagement. And again, the experience in most other cities is that these are maintained. Portland has been doing it for over 20 years. So if there was an issue with maintenance, you would think it would have come up, and I have not read anything about that.
The art is very subjective. Do you think there should be a method of polling a street when somebody wants to do something? You know, some may agree with a certain type of artwork, others may not. So do you think there should be a method of polling the street before they proceed?
Yes, and there is, I know it's funny because we've sort of had discussions in our neighborhood, and there's a particular intersection, and of course the people who are at the intersection said, well, sure, but, you know, what are you going to put there? I want some say. So you have to get real buy-in from the immediate neighbors, and then you also have to get, you know, buy-in from the larger ones. So, I mean, we have a process if you want to put in speed humps, or if you want to let your neighbors put in a parking pad, as the committee just, and again, those processes are in place, and I would expect the city to do the same thing on these, and you should require a fairly high standard of approval, because that's, you know, you're not going to do something where half the neighborhood doesn't want it. Again, it's a symbol of the community coming together, so it's only going to be approved if the community wants to do it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. All right, Barbara Matthew, you're up next. Welcome.
And thank you for letting me speak today. My name's Barbara Matthews, and I'm a resident in Ward 17, and I'm here to express why I support using paint to create city street murals, intersection murals. Well, I'll tell you a story. This summer, as part of a walking tour with Heritage Toronto, exploring the history of St. Clair West, Earls Court, Oakwood, and Regal Heights, we came across this beautiful mural on Springmount Avenue. Whoa, suddenly, completely out of the blue, many of the participants of this tour started to introduce themselves to each other and started sharing stories. Stories about the making of that mural on Springmount, and the meaning of the mural, and the meaning of the time as it was growing from the people. Up to that point, on that Heritage Toronto tour, we were strangers. But in the conversation that emerged, that all changed. As a recently retired high school TDSB visual arts teacher, formerly head of art at Northern Secondary School, I've led hundreds of youth in the painting of murals in public spaces throughout Toronto, and I can attest to the countless benefits to such an initiative. The benefits of painting public street art include: they create opportunities for communities to form relationships, and they act as visual touchstones to share stories and pride of ownership of our public spaces. They promote feelings of belonging and caring about our environment and community. They engage intergenerational participation in the project, and they also encourage our celebrating the rich history of our neighborhoods. Throughout Toronto, City Council has approved the creation of permanent murals in the past. Indeed, Council has approved funding to support the maintenance and restorations of these artworks. For years, the value of public art projects has been clearly understood in these chambers. So why is permanence suddenly such a concern? I highly recommend the use of paint versus chalk for these street murals, largely because chalk is fleeting, gone. It vanishes in a matter of days, whereas paint is more permanent, allowing a visual reminder of the experience of the work, creating an emotional link to these spaces which can help strengthen community. When artwork grows out of the local community, young people take pride and ownership of these spaces, and issues with graffiti and other destructive behaviors diminish significantly. Longer-lasting painted murals allow hundreds and potentially thousands of people over time to celebrate the public spaces that help make Toronto great. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Councillor Palacio has a question for you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, thank you, Ms. Matthews, for attending today's meeting.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that. And you made reference to the heritage tour that took place within the Regal Heights and north and south of St. Clair.
Yes.
And the same thing that happens every year, every summer, is with the garden tours that we have and the beautiful manicure front yards that we have. And that was part of the beautification aspect in terms of getting rid of some of the front yard parking paths that we were discussing before. But my question to you in terms of this specific, for example, street mural that we have, and the other aspects of heritage, nature, as well as beautiful gardens, this community somehow has come together and do appreciate exactly these kind of initiatives that have been done by the community, with the community, at no cost to the city. Is that the case?
Oh, yes. What happened when we were on that Heritage Toronto tour, and this was with people not just from our neighborhood, it was from all over the whole city of Toronto, as well as tourists. And when they saw the Springmount mural, people started going, wow, what's going on here? And then automatically, others who had taken part in that process, who helped grow that germ of idea, were showing pride of ownership. And it made our community just a notch stronger. Very, very important pride of our communities through art.
Thank you. There has been, within the report, one of the issues is in terms of cost, in terms of safety, and in terms of locations and so on. The location of the existing mural that on Springmount, in your opinion, is that the right location, perhaps?
I'm not sure if I understand the question.
Yeah, the mural on Springmount is approximately mid-block.
Oh, yes, yeah.
That's from Springmount to Davenport. Is in terms of safety, do you think that creates a safety factor?
Not at all, because you're not having to speed across a major intersection like at Oakwood and St. Clair, for example. This is a smaller street. It's not as busy. I think there shouldn't be any concern about safety. What it does is actually probably make people want to slow down a little bit more because it's so striking. So I wouldn't be concerned about safety, especially on that street, which is not so busy.
We do have beautiful street murals on bridges and public places that they're just beautiful. How do you relate, for example, this street mural on the road in relation to the ones that we have in other public places?
Well, you see, in the area where it was painted on Springmount, there really aren't any walls that they could put it, so this was another surface area that made sense to put the artwork. It's also on a slight incline, so you can see it as you come up over the hillside. So I think all areas, as long as it's safe and you're using the correct material, and it grows out of the community with the community's involvement, go for it.
My last question, do you think that would be wise to have a pilot project, to have that kind of meaningful discussion between city staff, our communities, and to measure the level of success at the end?
I think that would be very important to have a collaboration and not just one point of view, but different points of view. When we create public murals, when I was head of art, we would involve the place where the art would go. For example, at St. Michael's Hospital, we involved the staff. And you want to have intergenerational, not just the young people who do take care, better care. We didn't find a lot of graffiti afterwards in the neighborhood, but also the senior residents, the people who have a sense of the history, what came before, get their input. Involve the city councilors, involve every stakeholder. I think that makes sense.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Nunziata.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. So were you involved in the mural on Springmount?
No, I was not involved in this one. No, I've done many others for, as a high school art teacher, but not this particular mural.
So the others that you were involved in, were they on the street murals?
No, they were not on the street. They were inside a hospital and throughout schools.
Okay, so just a question. So trying to understand what the process would be. Who would be responsible for consulting all the neighbors on the street? And at getting them to agree if you were to put a street mural, and who would be responsible for that, and who would get and bring that information forward? You wouldn't expect the city to do that. It would
No,
be
with
somebody from the community.
Yeah,
that
the
would be
neighborhood groups. So we have one in Regal Heights. That's how I found out about this process.
So you would go around then door to door with a petition and get people's comments and then submit it in?
I think the speaker after me would probably speak better to address that. I'm assuming they would communicate as they have to me through email, possibly door to door at community meetings. But my colleague, Dave will be speaking
Okay.
after me.
So you wouldn't expect the city to do that? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll go to our last speaker, Dave Meslin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you so much. There is a fourth speaker, if you're able to accommodate. She hadn't signed up. She's the artist who actually drew the mural
Yeah, okay, sure.
that you're seeing there. So first of all, I just want to thank the chair, Councilor Robinson, for taking time to meet with me a few weeks ago, and then to meet with staff afterwards and try and find a compromise that addresses all the concerns that have been raised by Councilor Holliday and Councilor Moser, Councilor Nunziata. And thank you to Councilor Palacio, who's been supportive of our community process for 2 or 3 years now. And I believe you've tried to draft a motion that, again, addresses the concerns that have been raised by some of the councilors. I just brought some photos to walk you through how this all came to be. This is a photo actually from Portland, Oregon. So this is where this started. They've been doing it there for about 10 or 15 years. And they've done dozens of them all across the city, some in intersections, some mid-block. They're very beautiful. There's a lot of community participation. They're all endorsed and approved by the city in Portland. There's a process there that tries to address all the concerns that have been raised here today. And here are some more photos. You can see how it involves people of all ages from the neighborhood. So what we did in our neighborhood is we didn't just go out and suddenly paint on the street. We brought it up at a neighborhood meeting. We actually looked at all the possible intersections in the neighborhood. We talked to people and asked if there was support for it. We all agreed that all 4 corners of the intersection would have to agree. And then we went out and started knocking on doors, as you suggested, Councilor Nunziata. This is the first one we did 2 years ago, and we did it in chalk. It was a pilot. We didn't want to rush forward. We wanted to make sure the community was on board. So this is in front of a school, Regal Heights. This is 11 a.m. This is the spiral we drew. This is an hour later. We drew circles in the spiral, and then kids were able to fill in the circles with whatever they wanted. Sadly, you're going to see in this photo, it had already started to rain, and by 6 o'clock, it was gone, which is why we have cameras. So it was a really fun experience, and people who drove over it, people who were across the intersection, I asked them, what do you think of this? Everyone loved it. So this kind of gave us the confidence to go back to the neighborhood association and say, listen, this was fun, people liked it. Should we do this bigger? Should we do it with paint? Because the saddest part was that it was gone literally within an hour. So we started to research it. We found that cities across Canada are already allowing street murals. And I'm just going to walk through some of the processes they use, because I know there's been some some questions here. Councillor Holiday, I know you had particular questions about safety. These are slides produced by the City of Ottawa about the process they use, and I think we should do something very similar if we try this in Toronto. So first of all, only certain streets should be permitted with very low traffic. Obviously, no major streets, and no streets with buses. I think anyone would support any of those suggestions for Toronto. In terms of the design, they have all these guidelines in Ottawa, which I would agree with all of them. No tags, no words. So what we did this year is, because Toronto doesn't have a process, we essentially used the Ottawa guidelines. We did knock on doors. We did make sure there was support. We went through all of these guidelines in Ottawa. You'll see in our design, there's no words. And then here, if you look at this closely, community approval. Very similar to what we do for speed bumps in Toronto, an existing administrative process that we don't need to reinvent. Design must be approved and supported by 60% of landowners adjacent to intersection, and I completely agree with Councillor Nunziata. This should not be an administrative burden for the city. This should be citizens on their own as volunteers knocking on doors. Halifax has a process in place that addresses all the same concerns about safety, engagement, and cost. Vancouver has a street mural project, again involving paint, not chalk. Kitchener has one, and their aim there is to slow down traffic, and there's mixed data on that. Ottawa has, sorry, I actually didn't know this slide was animated. Before and after there, this is produced by the City of Ottawa, a slight reduction in speed as measured by city staff. And here, again, about a 10K reduction in speed. I'm going to go really quick now because I'm running out of time. This was our design this year. Melissa Frew drew it. We did chalk, then kids painted it. It was really fun. There's the whole group with their painting. They're very proud of it. It's still there 6 months later. It's slowly fading. We don't care. And we want to be able to move forward. We hope you'll support a motion that allows this project to move forward slowly. With 2 pilots this year, it's been worked on by councillors and staff. It's a good compromise, and I hope you'll support it, and I can take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, David, for attending this meeting and for being patient for the amazing work that you're doing out there. A few questions, and that are going to be mainly in relation to the motion that I'm going to move forward. That the first thing is to have only 2 mid-block pilots, so that we 2 street murals.
I think mid-block is a good idea. It addresses the concerns that Councillor Davis raised about markings, intersections. I think minimum 2, don't water it down to 1, because my concern is that this becomes viewed as a downtown project, and it's the last thing we need in the city. More evidence that the downtown does things that the suburbs can't do. So I would prefer to see 4, so every district can do one, but if staff are comfortable with 2, let's go with 2. But don't do it at 1, because it reinforces a bad political culture that we already have in Toronto.
Thank you. My next question is, each street mural is to be developed, and that to be the responsibility of the local community. Is that the intention?
Yeah, similar to how we do wall murals now, the design, all the effort that goes into it should be on the burden of the citizens who want to do it. We don't want to add unnecessary workload to staff.
Thank you. My next question has to do with the question of Councilor Nunziata as well, in terms of community consultation, and that you will undertake, or at least according to the recommendations, is the support has to be, and it has to be there from the local community to begin with.
Yeah. I mean,
that's the intention of it.
That's the whole fun of it. I wouldn't want to paint a mural if the people who live in front of it didn't like it. It would be a really miserable experience for everyone. So we're very supportive of the Ottawa approach, and staff here might want to do it differently. Should it be 70%, 50%? I don't know. I don't care. But there should be a regulation. I think it's really important that people aren't going out just painting on the streets. I mean, the reason we're here today is because we're asking for you to regulate it, because it's not safe for there not to be regulations. And we think there should be a process where you have to knock on doors, you have to get support. It's the same thing we already do for speed bumps, and we should apply it to this as well.
So overall, in terms of design, cost, community consultation, installation, the ongoing maintenance and design, all of that will have to be borne by the community at this stage in terms of the pilot.
That's exactly what we did last summer, and that's how we'd like to move forward. The 3 administrative areas are areas that already exist. So one is the street closure permit. We already do that. That's nothing new. Number 2 is approving the art. We already have a process for that. We should continue to use that, although there'd be additional regulations because it is on the street. And number 3, I've just blanked out, the approval process. So we already have some process, obviously, for speed bumps where the city somehow affirms that those signatures are accurate. I don't know how that works, but there must be a process there. So we should combine those 3 processes, use them together. It's not creating a new office, it's not creating new staff positions, and anything the citizens can do, the citizens should do. It shouldn't fall to the city.
The Springmount mural has become almost an icon in terms of attraction and because of its beauty, and there has been quite a bit of media attention, whatever. How about within the community? Is there support from the local community, mainly from the Regal Heights, and as well as the North Cliff to the north?
Yeah, I believe you have letters that were sent to you as attachments to the item. If you read through those, you'll see what the sense in the community was. We sent a message out last week about this meeting and asked people for their feedback and their support. The only negative thing I got was someone who emailed me and said, but will this cost a lot of money? We don't think the city should be wasting a lot of money on street murals. There's more important things. And I wrote back and I said, we paid for the paint, we knocked on the doors, we did as much work as we could. And he said, cool.
A couple questions.
And in terms of media, it's in the paper today. There's a beautiful photo in the Metro today. And I'm going to be on Metro Morning tomorrow as well, talking about it on CBC.
In terms of the environmentally speaking, in terms of materials, paint mainly, we're looking for something that would be durable perhaps, but also environmentally friendly. Is that the intention in terms of ensuring that there is no contamination if that's done?
Yeah, that's a big priority for us. I know that's a priority for Councillor Robinson, the environmental impacts of the paint. What we're looking for is something in between temporary and permanent. So the chalk is temporary, and it's really frustrating because you put a lot of work into this and then it's gone. It's like the worst message you want to do for the kids. We're going to spend all day building something that's gone. But no street paint is permanent. Oh, sorry.
And this will be done during the summer months whenever we have street festivals in terms of safety and whatever else?
Yes, absolutely. For safety reasons, it should be done during the summer months when we already allocate street closures all over the city for street parties. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you
so much.
Councillor.
Okay, thank you. So you were involved in the Spring Mount?
I was.
Yeah, okay. So the Spring Mount is near Regal Road, right? Regal,
Yeah, it's a very short block.
Regal School.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to that school.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But it's been a long time since I've been there.
The chalk one I showed you was right in front of the school.
Okay. So these other cities that you mentioned during your presentation that
Yeah.
had the street art, so have there been any problems with tagging on any of those street murals?
No, absolutely not.
By some of the gangs? Because we know that sometimes when you put up a mural on a wall, that you do get the tagging, right? You know, from some of the gangs.
Yeah, no,
Gangs out there. So you haven't had that, there hasn't been any experience on that. So if it happens, and who would be responsible for removing that tag?
Sure, I've looked at hundreds of photos of
Yeah?
street murals. I've never, ever seen a tag on it.
Okay, that's why I'm asking.
It's an interesting question. I hadn't thought of it. There's a bit of a culture in the tagging community actually not to tag murals. I've seen a few cases of it, but in most cases, they go after blank walls. And when a good mural goes up, they actually don't tag because they're like, oh, this is art.
Territory.
Yeah. So I've never heard of that being a problem. This is a slide from Ottawa, where the top line, you'll see in their experience through their pilots, there were no incidents or safety concerns, and it was very popular with the community and the media. This is from city staff in Ottawa. But to go back to your question, I think all responsibility should be on and costs. Someone mentioned insurance. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't create a huge financial barrier. But this should not add unnecessary cost to the city. That's not our intention.
Yeah. So what you're asking for is a pilot to be done in Ward 17 for street festivals, to just do the street murals during the street festival?
Well, we don't do a street party every year. I think we would probably this year just get a street closure for the mural, but we could throw a little party too. I don't think it's really that relevant if there's an existing party happening, but you definitely should get a street closure and work through the
Yeah, no, I
existing
understand,
process
yeah.
to do that.
No, the reason I asked that question is if there's a community that is not having a street festival and they want the street mural, so I'm not sure, I guess it would be
Oh, I see.
Palacio that will answer that question. Is it only if you have a street festival that you?
Well, luckily, there's no
Or can-
definition of
can
what a
it be-
street party is. So
Yeah,
you could put up 5 balloons and say it's a
Yeah,
street party.
yeah. Okay, that would be your counselor's answer, then I would have to ask him that question. But I love it, and I wouldn't mind having that pilot in my ward as well.
Thank you. I hope you have one.
Thank you. I did manage to see portions of your presentation on the TV when it came up. So are there results? You mentioned on one slide that there were some findings related to safety and speed.
Yeah, so
at
this is
one
from
of
the city of Ottawa. They did before and after. And again, this isn't scientific, it's one example. I think city staff have a fair argument that these reductions in speed probably won't last. That when it's a new mural, people are going to slow down. At some point, it might go back to where it was. It's definitely not going to speed up cars. We definitely notice it. Even when we were doing the photo, we did a photo for the paper yesterday, and when we were hanging around, we were looking at cars, and yeah, they definitely slow down. The question you raised about markings, I think is a valid question. I think the answer
Yes.
is to do them mid-block. Even though the history of these are mostly intersections.
Yes.
If you look at the photos from Portland, they're all,
So,
sorry, I'm just trying to.
yeah, so the issue about accessibility,
So here's an example. I agree that definitely might confuse someone who's trying to figure out where the proper place is to
where do you
cross.
stop?
The answer is do it mid-block.
Where do you safely
We did ours
cross?
mid-block. We're very happy with it. It's also, it'll last longer because there's less, you've got more traffic, obviously, at an intersection. So if
So-
you're recommending an amendment that specifies, it says mid-block? It already says mid-block. The pilot's mid-block. There you
Okay,
go.
so one of the things that I think would be useful would be to get some more information about the regulations in other jurisdictions, because I didn't
have those here.
I didn't actually see it in the report, so.
I've got some here. So this is from Ottawa.
I can see you'll go ahead and do a pilot project, and it will be probably as successful as the last one, and the question will then be, how do we regulate it? Because you're suggesting, I think, that there should be regulations around them.
They already exist in other cities.
Right.
We're
so-
saying, do what they're doing.
So there are regulations, obviously, in a bunch of jurisdictions, and it might be useful to find out what they are and to have a report back on what those regulations are in other jurisdictions. Because I do have some concerns about accessibility and interpreting signs on the road and on our sidewalks as well, to make sure that anyone with visual impairment or anyone who, I mean, we all the time have communities say, please put the markings on our roads. Our intersections don't have the lines painted enough. We are always asking for upgrading the pedestrian crossings, for zebra markings, for all of these things that we know are ways to improve pedestrian safety on the road. So my concern about accessibility and safety has to do with just a common understanding of what these markings on our roads mean, and people have generally an understanding, but if you put on things like you just showed in the intersection, it would be very confusing.
Right, so
Maybe we do need to, while we're doing pilots, than to look at other regulations. And I do want some feedback from the accessibility community. We have an accessibility committee, and I think it's reasonable to ask them as well.
I think those are all great ideas.
Thank you very much. Your presentations are always colorful and upbeat, so that was fantastic. Great ideas. Just because you're the communication outreach king, really, you're saying that you, in your experience, is there widespread support for these type of right across the city versus just downtown?
I think that was actually staff's main
Yeah.
concern, actually, which is probably valid, that if we open the doors, you might, you said you'd like to see one in your ward. I think this isn't a downtown thing. I think people would like to see this all across the city, but I think it makes sense to start slow. Politically, we're getting support from lots of people. The mayor's office has already said that he's going to be at our pilot project. He wants to be there. He wants to see it. He fully supports it. The media response has been overwhelmingly positive. So I think it's worth trying, and I think all the questions that have been raised with safety concerns are really valid, and we should use the pilot project as a way of exploring how to deal with those.
Great, thanks.
Here, another deputant?
There is another here, if you're able to accommodate that.
Okay, maybe just a quick.
She's
Okay.
the artist who actually drew the mural.
All right, if you could just quickly come up and speak, because we don't have you on our list, so.
He's okay.
Welcome.
Taking the time to let me speak. Sorry, I didn't realize I needed to sign up, so. Hello, my name is Melissa Frew. I live on Springmount. I was approached by Dave Meslin in the spring of 2015 to help with the design and painting of the Springmount Avenue mural. The project was incredibly well received by the community, and we had great involvement while we were painting the project. We had lines of both children and adults waiting to get their turn to be a part of the project and paint with us. As an artist, I love the idea of public art and the opportunity to pull together a community and leave behind something beautiful, something inspiring for the community. And as a resident of the city, I also understand the need for fiscal responsibility and public safety. I'm, sorry, not really good at speaking. I'm all for safety. I have children. I want them to be safe in our city and on our streets. The report mentioned distracted driving and slippery surfaces. Our street mural hasn't been any more distracting to drivers, as far as I can tell, than any of the already sanctioned wall murals that appear around the city. In fact, anecdotally, I would say that probably if anything, it slowed down traffic on our street. We live on a somewhat curved street. People tend to race through. They think it's fun. It's a bit like a racetrack, and it has somewhat slowed people down. I do see them slowing down to look at the mural, so that's great. As for driving surfaces, I have not experienced or witnessed any issues with traction on our road or with any of the street paintings that I might have encountered. As Dave mentioned, we can certainly set parameters around what materials could be used for painting. By their nature, street murals on asphalt are temporary. Similar to road markings, they are subject to the abuse of vehicle traffic, salt, roadwork, and weather, to name just a few things. This is okay that they're temporary. This is okay that they fade. Let's not reject the idea outright because it's not permanent. Instead, let's look at this as an ongoing opportunity for community involvement. A faded or broken mural is simply an opportunity for that community to plan a new project. City resources are stretched. However, there is already an existing program set up to manage murals. The Street Art Program, or START for short, this program, in their own words, treats streets as vital public spaces and aims to develop, support, and increase awareness of streets, art, and its indispensable role in generating social and economic benefits, adding beauty and character to Toronto's communities. I don't want to miss an opportunity, and let's just possibly expand this program to include streets. As the artist involved with the Springmount project, I still constantly receive positive feedback about the mural that we created. I cannot actually recall receiving any negative feedback from anybody. It is slowly fading, and in that, it is still beautiful. There is pride in our community that we did this. The mural is a footprint to our involvement, and hopefully in the future, we will gather again and make a plan to refreshen it or renew our community our commitment to this beautiful neighborhood that we live in. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Move to questions of staff. Any questions for staff? Councillor Hall, Councillor Palacio would go first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one question, and that's to the General Manager of Transportation, so Ms. Parker, Elise Parker from Public Realm. My question is the proposed installation of 2 mid-block pilot street murals. Is that supportable?
Through the chair, yes, we will work with the councilor to do a pilot, preferably this year if we can.
Were you able to take a look at the motion and the recommendations?
Yes, we saw one. I think we were recommending the addition of mid-block in there just to quell some concerns about the location of the.
So would you be in support of this recommendation?
We would work with you, Councilor.
Thank you so much. That's it.
Councillor,
Just on that point, would you support a pilot in my ward too?
We're gonna leave that to the chair and the committee in terms of that. But again,
Councillor Holiday and then Councillor Moser. Oh, Councillor Davis, go ahead.
Would you be able to report back on policies, on bylaws, policies and procedures in other municipalities, and any other options we might pursue in the City of Toronto?
through the chair, our preference would be probably on the back end of this pilot, we could report back in total, and at that time, we would be able to outline, based on other work of other cities, I actually did this in Philadelphia when I was there as well, on any particular guidelines or regulations we'd want to draw around it.
Okay, and that would be in the fall of 2016?
Yeah, the third or fourth quarter, depending on when they get out there, we would probably, I think we had recommended doing a speed study. We'd do a speed study before, after, and then typically about 2 or 3 months after as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next would be Councillor Holiday and then Councillor Moser.
Thank you, Chair. To the General Manager, have you got some experience with murals in another city or things that you've seen in your professional career?
Through the chair, yes. I mean, as they mentioned, there are many cities that do this. I think some of the issues that we've tried to identify is that this is sort of just like any other program, and currently our staff are oversubscribed with the 6 programs that we have. Sure. I know folks are trying to minimize the amount of staff involvement, but we would still be typically looking at probably 30 to 40 hours to go through the reviews, the meetings, the consultations, and internal coordination on the stuff to pull it off. So that was one of our biggest concerns. Again, just sort of layering on additional work on top of our currently growing programs. In Philly, we approved something similar to this in one of our BIAs. Again, our concern was over time that these would sort of degrade into something that would be unsightly, and that did occur, and this is in a funded BIA. So again, the concern is what this looks like on the back end. They look great out of the gate, but we want to make sure that there's adequate commitment to maintain them.
So, yeah, so with the murals, I mean, they can live on if the community stays engaged, they maintain it. What happens, though, if it does go, if it loses interest over time? I think you had a photo, I thought.
I'm sorry?
I wonder if there's a photo of something in Philly. So I did ask about it. I want to make sure we're clear about the importance that we set parameters around these, because they don't live on, potentially.
Are you done?
Just,
Oh, a photo. I'm pulling up the photo from the report.
2011, so I think this image was taken in 14 or 15, so this is about 2 years later. And just again, the commitment to maintaining them, or they just start looking like a mess in the street. That's
Okay.
one of our concerns.
So potentially, if something goes wrong, we can remove this, yes, with power washing, or there's some way to take the mural away if it doesn't work? I'm just worried about permanence.
Through the chair, again, one big concern is the materials that get put down. Obviously, persons with disabilities have great concern about slippery materials, so we tend to be very prescriptive about the type of paint that needs to go down there, depending on the durability of it. Sometimes it can be power washed, but sometimes it needs to be ground out as well.
Okay, and any idea what the cost is to the city if we had to remove one?
Power washing might be, for sort of an intersection-sized mural, might be in a range of several hundreds to low thousands of dollars. If we have to sort of grind something out, it tends to be in the probably several thousands of dollars, so.
Could you mitigate the risk of having to grind if we had controls over the type of materials?
Yeah, we could, and again, we'd be probably looking for something that wouldn't be grinding, we typically has to be very thick paint, and we probably would try to do something that is a non-slip, probably water-based or something that would be easily removable.
Okay. So through careful program management, we could reduce risks by specifying certain materials that are preferable from a city's perspective?
Absolutely, and we could speak with our peer cities to figure out what's working best right now.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Moser was next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sounds like Ottawa has done this for a while. Do you know how formal the process is? Is there a cost for permits? I'm just wondering how long they've done this.
It's been for a few years in Ottawa. The one I'm most familiar with is probably Seattle, where they have an established program as well. Their process, they say, can take upwards of 3+ months. So again, it's not something where you just show up one day and plop something in there and they stamp it and it's a go. There is staff involvement in these things. And again, like all of our mural programs, we want to review them to make sure that and we do run into issues at times with offensive words, offensive images, So Again, I don't want to overstate it, but at the same time, I don't want to understate that staff would need to be engaged in this program.
Well, the community itself is saying we'd like to do this without cost, so it's always nice to do that, but I want to look at this realistically. Once it gets into our hands, the type of paint, inspection, all of these things, can you give us a report back on that?
Sure, we would, as part of the pilot, we will track all the time that we've dedicated to the program, and we can give you a fair estimate in terms of what it's taken on a per mural basis for staff costs.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. How will you go about deciding which 2 areas you're going to do the pilot in?
We'll arm wrestling. I don't know. Through the chair. Obviously, Councillor Palacio is a person who brought this forward. The leads on this, I believe, are they Councillor Annunziata in your ward? Is that? Yeah. So. Yeah, I think we can put out a quick call and assess whether or not there's interest from individual councillors. The concern here is we may have to say no if there's more than 2 interested parties, so obviously.
So Ward 32 will definitely be keen at some point, sooner rather than later.
Okay, fair enough.
I guess I'll have a couple questions. So is there actually any evidence that shows that street murals enhance or reduce road safety?
The research we've done has not shown definitively. There has been some sort of spot speed studies before and after, and as one of the deputants mentioned, again, you will likely see something where if we did it before and right after the event, putting something unique out on a roadway typically does get people's attention and they behave differently. However, we've also seen it over time. They sort of desensitize to that and typically return to their normal behavior. So I would say that the research doesn't show that there's any safety issues, nor are there sort of clear safety improvements.
Okay. And to the Environment Office, I know they're here today. I'd asked for a report on, when we have parking pads all over the city and the water comes onto the street, and it hits these, these graphics, and they chose to use lead paint. Is there any impacts on potentially on the water system and the waterways of the city? Sorry?
Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Mark Beckgreen here.
Oh, I can't see you, Mark,
Yes,
sorry.
the Environment and Energy Division. So through you, unfortunately, the request that you made from the last meeting didn't land on my desk until last week, so we haven't thoroughly investigated the issue. But what we have done is identified that depending on the type of paint or materials that are used, if it is the same materials that we use today, water-based street paint, the regular wear and tear is not likely to have a significant impact. However, if there was a requirement that they had to be removed at a later date, you would want to probably have some protocol in place to sort of contain the materials as it's washed up or removed from the street, as is probably done already today.
Okay, so you're saying during the removal, if that comes to that removal, then there has to be some precautions?
We would suggest that it be investigated anyway or looked at as part of the pilot.
Okay, so if we could still get that report at some point, it would be good, because this sounds like it's going to be a process, just based on some of the motions coming forward. Okay, thanks very much. Speakers, who would like to speak on this? Councillor Palacio?
Thank you,
Go
Madam
ahead.
Chair. I would like to move the following motion, but before that, I would like to thank you, Madam Chair, for agreeing to take carriage of this motion, and also I would like to thank all the deputants for taking the time to come down here to City Hall to speak on it, so passionately about it. I would like to move the following motion, if the clerk is kind enough just to put it forward. In essence, what it says is that City Council permit the installation of 2 mid-block pilot street murals on low-volume local streets, and it keeps on going, each street mural to be developed and be the responsibility of the local community consultation on design to be undertaken by local residents, and that to be demonstrated to the General Manager of Transportation Service. Next one, the full cost design, community consultation, installation, and the ongoing maintenance, and the cost of it to be the responsibility of the local community group. And the design, the project materials and location suitability, and to be approved by the General Manager of Transportations. Madam Speaker, members of the committee, the street mural that's been painted on Springmount Avenue last year, it does reflect what has become the heart and soul of the graffiti management strategy that was adopted unanimously by City Council. And this piece of art that's located in one of the side streets, mid-block, on Springmount, and in my opinion, reflects the heart and soul of this graffiti management plan that is being adopted by the arts community citywide. And this is the kind of thing that brings that sense of pride, community cohesion, and support from the arts overall. This piece of art that's been spoken by the deputants, it's something that it really reflects. It's not only popular and beautiful, and that was created by local artists, children, young, seniors. Everyone got involved. It was a real inspiration throughout the Regal Heights community, and as well as the North Cliff and the rest of the neighborhood. It's the whole community came as a caring community, very engaged with, and I should say, with no cost to the city at all. No cost to the city at all. This piece of art has been created, it has been maintained, and one thing that I would like to mention to you is, I don't know if you recall, about a couple of years ago, we made a special presentation to Dick Watts, who was the champ of that community, and unfortunately he passed away. And this community has come together in such a powerful way to take care of orphan spaces that will be the responsibility of the Transportation Division. They have created beautiful gardens. They do the maintenance throughout the summer months. And that's what brings that community together with that tremendous sense of cohesion. And that's the envy of other communities in the area. And so there has been a number of positive stories, as we all heard, and articles in the media, and throughout the community. This has become an inspiration. It's one of a kind piece of art, and it will continue to play an important role in terms of enhancement, in terms of beautification of our community, of our city. As a local city councilor, I do support this tremendously, and I think that this is an opportunity, another opportunity for all of us to start working and promoting, supporting, cultivating the art in different ways. It's not only on walls and public places, but what a beautiful thing to do on our local streets in a safe way as well. So it's this is overall, I would say, this kind of murals are ways of communicating those artistic expressions, visions, the cultural influences, and the everyday life experiences as a visual story that will help to connect the cultural fabric of our local communities and our neighborhoods, Madam Chair. And hopefully that will count with the support of the committee. Thank you.
And then Councillor Nunziata? Okay, Councillor Davis is next.
So I would just move a motion that asks for the general manager to report, to review bylaws, policy, and practice in other municipalities, report in the fourth quarter, and I've inserted after consultation with the Disability Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee to Public Works with findings and policy options for the City of Toronto. You know, you can't not, that's a double negative, you can't not love this beautiful artwork. I know who did it, and he's a very talented artist, and he's just expressing himself in many ways all over the city, mostly on sidewalks, which we haven't even talked about. But I do think we need to have a more thorough review after the pilots are completed, so that we can look at what kinds of regulations and what form they would be for the City of Toronto. So we might as well do the work now, and in anticipation that we'll be back in the same place after the pilots take place this summer. And I do want to make sure that our Disability Committee is consulted on any options that come forward in the fall.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And then Councillor Nunziata wanted to speak briefly.
Yes, just briefly, I do support the motion by Councillor Palacio, and I would like to ask if one of the members could move that we do a pilot in my ward.
I don't think we should do that.
To increase it.
Yeah.
No, and I'll tell you why, okay? And I spoke to the staff, that I want the option to be able to do that. Councillor Davis, please, like I'm trying to speak, okay? We just approved a project just a couple months ago in my ward, on John Street, where we have, where Metrolinx has closed John Street, and we have a pedestrian bridge going over the tracks. And we just approved a cultural hub, an outdoor farmers market on John Street, which is going to be a dead-end street. And we're working with the city staff on, and that would be a perfect pilot to where we can have street art, because the street, it will be a dead-end street, and we have the artist from Artscape. Artscape is relocating on that site. So it would be an ideal location to have one of the pilots. So I'm asking that you increase it, and that I be allowed to, an option with the BIA, because there are no residents, it would be the BIA that would take the initiative on it. So I would like that option, and if I can have a member of the committee move that on my behalf, thank you.
Okay, other speakers? Councillor McMahon?
Thank you, and I'd like to thank Dave Meslin for all he's done in the City of Toronto overall, but especially bringing this forward through Councillor Palacio and his lovely artists. I didn't forget her name. But it's phenomenal, and doing all the research and the fantastic way he presents with all the facts and information and great photos for us. The members of committee, you'll see on your submission PW 10.140 is a letter from Jerry Dunn in my ward, and he shows you, it's not in color, but he shows a beautiful mural that is street mural that's been done on private property at Main Square, which adds vibrancy and color to an area that needs more of that. So that's phenomenally done on private property. I'm a big supporter of murals. I think they're a fantastic way to improve our neighborhood, add walkability, livability, and clean up the graffiti and the tagging. And so I would love to, I'll support the pilot. I like it to be more than 2 areas because as Councilor Nunziata said, I would welcome it in Ward 32. Our residents would love this. I can think of a lot of streets. So I'm just looking forward to hopefully spreading it out more.
Okay, Councillor Holyday?
Thank you, and I do have an amendment that
Yeah,
requests go up.
have it here, yeah. Can you put it up on the screen?
So it's just to establish a lifespan for the street murals through the pilot project and fix an end date when the mural will be looked at and evaluated. And I don't think this is offensive in any way to what we're trying to do. And I just want to say about this initiative, I'm going to support it. Once in a while, an idea comes along, and it's worth giving it a go. And I think a couple of test murals here in a pilot is an idea worth looking at. There's a lot of potential community benefit out of this. I am leery. There's some care that needs to be put into this to make sure we don't just say, yes, go ahead and do things, but we develop a program around it. And the first thing is the main purpose of my motion. I think of a place called Carsbrook Park in Ward 3 where a beautiful community garden was installed about 10, 12 years ago. And it's come to my attention now that that community garden is now in disrepair, and there's been requests to actually sod it over, which is disheartening. But it tells you the reality of what happens in the community sometimes. And we saw some photos of that today, is that community groups come together well-intentioned, they do a great project, and then things change. People move, kids get older, life priorities change, and that heart and that spirit that went into the original project fades away. And I think the deputies talked about it. Nothing is permanent, not even painted, hard-painted things on the street. In fact, these are guaranteed to wear. There's going to be plows going over it, salt going over it, cars going over it, pedestrians going over it. It will wear away quickly. And I think we should just set a point that we look at that and say, okay, has this thing been cared for by the community over time? Is it still in good shape? Can it live? Or it's in poor shape. Is there any interest in having anyone repair this project right now? Or, you know what, let's remove it. What I don't want to have are things that are half disrepair on our street. And it makes the street look poorer. And you know what, as councillors, we'll all get the calls. We already get those about some of the community projects that had faded over time, and we all know examples of that in our ward. So by simply just putting some parameters around that, I think it's prudent, and I think it's something determined in the pilot. The other key aspect about this, and we've heard it throughout today, is that this should come at no cost to the taxpayer. And I'm very serious about that. I think that funding these either directly or indirectly is a matter of concern. We've got a lot of pressures across the city. It bothers me a little bit that there are no murals put on private property. There are no examples on private roads. And what makes city streets different? Is it because there would be funding and support? I'm not sure. But by asking the community groups to front the money to cover these, it covers off my first point, that we really do have an engaged group that is quite interested, and they've raised the money to do so. And anyone that complains about that, you know what, go do a wall mural that costs nothing, or go do it on private land where there's no approval process, and you can still do what you want to create. So by making sure that those funds are covered, that the taxpayers' interests are covered, that if one day it does have to get removed because it just didn't live on long enough, and there's nothing wrong with that, that's just reality, that we've taken the responsible step. And you know what? I hope my colleagues support the amendment here and they support the overall motion. I think this is exciting and can produce nice spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also have a motion which I'd like to introduce, and basically amending yours motion, seeks to amend your motion to include up to 4 mid-block Pilot Street murals, up to 4. Okay. You know what, this for me appears to be somewhat of a no-brainer. I mean, you have an opportunity to introduce some beautification measures around the city. I think you should embrace that and encourage it. In fact, obviously with some safeguards. You don't want the Wild West, so you want to introduce some parameters around this. But you know, building an otherwise interesting and beautiful city costs money. I understand, you know, like, well, we're going to hear this over and over again. And in fact, as I was listening to Councillor Holyday, I couldn't help but think about the debate we're about to have regarding the subway. You know, somebody will coin the phrase again, cost overruns, and somebody will talk about making the stations more interesting or paying for some artwork around the stations and how that has expanded the costs of those projects. But the reality is that pleasant architecture and art costs money. It does. But so what we're doing is we're really getting a city that's square and it's glass and it's not interesting. And you know, as soon as they develop plastics that will be durable enough to build with, and so on. That's what, you know, that's the architecture we're going to be getting. You know, it'll be square plastic architecture, because if it's the cheapest way to build, then that's what people will do. So yes, ultimately there is a cost to pleasant architecture. There's a cost to art. There's a cost to building a beautiful, pleasant city. That's a fact. You don't get it for nothing. I guess the Medici's got some art for nothing back in the day. I'm not sure that's on anymore. But look at what the Medici's left behind in terms of art. So anyway, that's my motion. I hope you support it. Thank you.
Okay, any other speakers? I'm going to speak, and I think that's it then. So even though I'm putting the motion forward, I'm half-hearted about this issue. And I did tweak Caesar's motion to, I think, make it a bit more palatable. Also, Councillor Holyday has a motion that an amendment I'm going to be supporting, and I'll take carriage of Councillor Janet Davis's motion. I'm not supporting Councillor Perutz's motion, and I'll tell you why. So I've spearheaded a number of art initiatives in this city, deeply supportive of public art, but and I think street murals are great in principle, but I am concerned about transportation services. They're already busting at the seams. Their workload, I've had a bird's eye view in the last year of their workload, and it's really astronomical. And so I just worry about putting more pressure on this division. We're about to roll out a road safety plan. We all know the stats of pedestrian and cyclists and motorist deaths in the city last year, and this is something I think we need to really focus on. And so I feel very strongly we need to do things in baby steps. Dave Meslin himself said, let's start small, and he's on board with the two, as is Councillor Palacio, who really initiated all this. I want to show you a couple pictures, and this is why I'm concerned, and I think staff shared the same concerns. So this summer when the Pan Am torch ran down Yonge Street, They painted a number of manholes or storm sewer grates, as well as, I guess, what are they called? The, Elise, what do you call them, the boxes?
Outside the box program, traffic signal boxes.
Okay, so if you can put up this traffic signal box first. No, the other one first. So this is a vertical surface, and this is one of our lovely amenities across the city. And so the as part of the Pan Am and Elise's program, they've been painting these. This was painted. I watched it be painted in the summer, I think it was about June or early July. And you can see this picture was taken in December. It's still in mint condition. Now, if you see right beside it, the other photo is a picture of a storm sewer grate painted at the exact same time. Again, I watched all this be painted because it was in my ward. And you can see, if you could just pull it over a little bit further, Stacy, thank you. This is before the snow started to fly and sidewalks were being cleared. This was, as I said, December. And you can see already the damage on this, on this surface, on the horizontal surface versus a vertical surface. So I am worried about the maintenance, as our staff, as you can see from the report. And that's why they initially came across, in the report, certainly they've turned down this project. But I am supportive of the 2 pilot murals, which will be developed, operated, and paid for by local community groups. And I think we'll have an evidence-based decision. At the end of the pilot, we can say, this is a smart way to go, this isn't. And with Councillor Holliday's amendment, which I think is a good one, and Councillor Janet Davis's, we'll come back with more information on if it impacts people with disabilities or sight issues. And we'll also know more about the environment when we get the environmental report, that if the paint is having any impact. I doubt it is, but it's good to know. So I don't want to be a wet blanket, but at the same time, I think we need to do this, in a small-scale way to see about the, the implications on maintenance, on staff resources, and I think it's fantastic the community is going to play a part in this, and we'll see the results of this in about a year's time. So those are my comments, and now we'll move the clerk to tell me which one goes first. So we've got, the very first one is up on the screen, and it's the bylaws, policies, and practices in other municipalities. This is Councillor Davis has asked me to put this forward, so I'm taking carriage of it, in the fourth corner of 2016. So all those in favor? Okay, that passes. I don't know, where's Councillor Holliday? He's there. Okay, next one is Councillor Holliday's. So if we'll put it up on the screen, and this is about practical lifespan, which is also a worry for me, and that the murals be evaluated and considered for removal or replacement through a new project. All those in favor? That carries. Number 3 is Councillor Perruzza, that Councillor Robinson's motion be amended to permit the installation of 4 mid-block pilot street murals. Up to 4. Yes, you're right, correct. Up to 4. All in favor? And that carries. Against? Opposed? 3-2. Okay, that carries. And then number 4 is the main meaty one. I'm taking carriage of this one, and it basically says let's proceed. So that will amend this, the previous one. So all in favor? That's carried. Excellent. Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you to all the speakers. And the deputations, so I'm just being reminded, item as amended. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries. All right. Thank you. All right, so we just have 2 items left. We're doing very well. Let's see if we can pull this off before lunch. We would set a record. PW 10.5, proposed amendments to the sewers and water supply bylaws. So this is... This was deferred at council, and that actually mucked up some stuff. So we just need to adopt this item. So Councillor Moser, you had held it. Do you have any questions or concerns?
Question of staff.
Okay, questions of staff?
On page 17, the swimming pool. What is the policy on emptying swimming pools?
Through you, Madam Chair.
Bromide and chloride-based swimming pools need to be dechlorinated and then can be discharged to the storm sewer system in a controlled manner. With respect to saltwater pools, they must be discharged to a sanitary sewer.
So how do we check that? I see all kinds of pools, they just run out a hose and they just empty it into our systems. So do they have to apply for a permit, or I'm just wondering what the process is?
It is not, through you, Madam Chair, is not done through a permit process. It is done through education and outreach with homeowners where we receive complaints. I can tell you that every neighbor who has a neighbor with a pool knows our bylaw very well and our hotline number. As well, we've outreach with the Pool and Hot Tub Council, and they've educated their members on the proper way of handling the various discharges. Where we find non-compliance, we take action, and indeed we've enforced through the courts a number of pool companies.
Have we found any that were not in compliance? Do we check, or is there a system where we randomly check every so many, or?
Yes, we do. It's quite visible, and when staff, enforcement officers are driving, they will check, and as well, it's driven by complaints.
So how many have we prosecuted?
Off the top of my head, at least a handful of companies have been prosecuted.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Any speakers on the item?
I'll just move the
Okay,
item.
go ahead. Oh, you're going to move it? Okay, sorry, I didn't hear that. Councillor Moser's moving it. All in favor? Opposed? Carried? There's a good example of what, when we don't get staff involved in our motions, we muck stuff up. So that's, Councillor Layton, we're pointing a finger at you. PW 10.6, reviewing subject pollutants in the sewers bylaw. And we have one speaker on this, Karen Buck. Welcome, Karen. Come on up. You've got 5 minutes, as you know. Okay.
So I'm not quite sure if you received my written deputation in your package at all, or got it late? No? Anyway, it's just saying thank you very much to Chair Robinson for putting forward the motion and the initiative to have a review and then a report in the latter part of this year and the beginning of next year. And also to this committee, who over the years has totally supported really forward-thinking water issues and wastewater issues. We have a waterfront that actually is an area of concern, and we had a Toronto Regional RAP, or Remediation Action Plan, and as a result, we're looking for, in the future sometime, a swimmable, fishable, and drinkable Lake Ontario. And you have done incredible things, a new sewer use bylaw. You passed that in the late 1990s. In 2001, you passed, according to the mediation agreement on the Ashbridges Bay treatment plant, the 100% biosolids beneficial use, which then made the sewer use bylaw even, was a reason for the sewer use bylaw being very stringent so that we could meet the Ontario regulations for nutrient management applications. And now you're looking at you know, these pollutants that are part of what industry and commercial establishments could be putting into the sewer use, into the wastewater and the sewer. So I'm really supportive of what I hope what you've just passed, and also of the chair's initiative. But I do have two questions. and this is not in my written deputation, at the end of the review, through the report, are we actually going to know the priorities we need to set for this group of pollutants, the priority pollutants that are going into the sewer right now to keep our drinking water clean in Lake Ontario? And are we going to know and have the information we need to put in place short-term, long-term goals that target the prioritization, the minimization, perhaps the phase-out and removal of these pollutants from the city's wastewater system? And so that's what I would be looking for. And I can give you those two questions by email later. Anyway, I think it's really great to actually have this review and report, and hope that we continue to put through the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee all sorts of initiatives and forward thinking that does keep our drinking water clean and does keep our wastewater system working well. Thank you.
Karen, and we did, just so you understand or know, that we did get your communication. It was just
Okay,
circulated.
so that it was late.
We do have it, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for...
So that's just saying thank you for all the things that this committee has done over the years, and for thanking you, Chair Robinson, for bringing this forward.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Karen, for your deputation. And we have to vote to extend if we want to finish this item, which is the last item. Councillor McMahon is moving that. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. So any questions for staff on this? If not, any speakers? I'll speak on it. I moved this motion, or I was going to move this motion at council, but then Councillor Layton referred it back to staff. And this is just an important review. It's a timely time to do it. I've done this in consultation with staff. Even the timelines were adjusted to make sure that they can do it properly, because there's a lot of consultation, I understand, from the general manager. There's a lot of consultation involved in this process. So they're comfortable with the timelines, they're comfortable with the motion. So I'd love your support on this today. All in favor? Councillor Prutz, opposed? That carries. Thank you, everyone, for a very effective meeting. Oh, Councillor Holiday, I'm sorry. What, Councillor Holiday's motion?
This is, I'm sorry, I don't have the item number, but this is in response to the memo from Councillor Mihevc.
Oh, we dealt with it.
Did we deal with it? Okay.
Yeah, we referred it and asked for consultation and a report.
All right, it has gone through. Thank you.
Pardon? Yes, thank you. Have a good day, everyone.